What do you really know about Igbo Ukwu? Do you know anything about the ancient objects and bones excavated from this place almost 90 years ago? Who was the individual found buried in a sitting position, wearing a crown and surrounded by an astounding 110,000 chameleon beads? And what age did radiocarbon testing really return for this place? These are some of the mysteries of Igbo Ukwu, which recent research is shedding light on. The world first heard about Igbo Ukwu in southeastern Nigeria following a 1938 discovery in the compound of a man named Isaiah Anozie. Before then, the Efe Benin area was considered the source of all advanced culture like bronze casting in the lower Niger River region. Then in 1970, the publication by the English archaeologist Forster Shaw of the dates returned by radiocarbon testing of objects found at Igbo Ukwu showed that Igbo Ukwu bronzes were centuries older than any other finds in the region. This at last sparked an interest in the study of Igbo history and culture. Of course, there was some controversy surrounding the age of Igbo Ukwu. Some struggled to revise the established colonial narrative about Nigerian prehistory. I believe that in part it led to the publication of an article by the pioneer scholar of African art and archaeology, Frank Willett, in 1983. The article titled "Who Taught the Smiths of Igbo Ukwu" goes on at length about Ife and Benin, but had very little to say about Igbo Ukwu itself. However, scholars have pointed out that the number of places in the Niger Forest region that have produced definite first millennium radiocarbon dates like Igbo Ukwu is exceptionally small, and that Igbo Ukwu seems to have been the first to cast bronze in the area and could not have borrowed the technology. More remarkably, archaeologists found that there are no Igbo Ukwu style bronzes discovered from any place outside of Igbo Ukwu itself, thus confirming that the artifacts are indigenous to the area and cannot be said to have been introduced from areas outside of Igbo land. Another unknown fact was that even at that time, Igbo Ukwu was already part of a large network of international trade. Some of the beads discovered at Igbo Ukwu were later found to have been imported from Fostat in Egypt. Excavations of similar beads in the city of Gao in eastern Mali indicate interregional trade along the Niger River. Today, let's explore the mysteries of Igbo Ukwu, the curious objects found in the three locations so far excavated, named Igbo Isaiah, Igbo Richard, and Igbo Jonah, the identity of the individual in the elaborate burial chamber at Igbo Richard, and the controversy regarding the age and place of Igbo Ukwu in African history. Please click the bell icon to be notified of my latest content. Thank you. The town of Igbo Ukwu, which translates to Great Igbo in English, is located in present-day Anambra State in southeastern Nigeria. From about the 8th century AD, it served as the capital of the Kingdom of Inri, the first Igbo kingdom. The story of the Igbo Ukwu discoveries began with an accidental find in 1938. The first recorded discovery was by a local resident named Isaiah Anozie, who, while digging a well for water in his compound, uncovered several bronze vessels. It's important to point out that long before this time, Igbo people had been discovering pottery and bronze objects in their compounds. Some of the bronze pieces recovered by Isaiah Anozie were shared among his neighbors, while others remained in his possession. News of the discovery gradually spread. Several months later, a colonial officer named J.O. Field, who was the assistant district officer for the area, heard about the bronzes. He visited Igbo Ukwu and purchased a number of the objects directly from Anozie. Additional bronze items believed to have come from the same compound were later purchased by other colonial officials. When the Nigerian Department of Antiquities was established in 1946, bronzes acquired by J.O. Field were presented to the department and later accessioned by the National Museum in Lagos. A number of objects acquired by another district officer, F.W. Carpenter, in 1939 was sent to the British Museum. Even at this early stage, scholars recognized that these artifacts were extraordinary. The archaeologist Thurston Shaw later wrote that the objects were, and I quote, utterly unlike the work of either Benin or Ife. Their age and affinities and the reason for their burial in the ground remained a mystery. End quote. The discoveries raised more questions than answers and highlighted the need for proper archaeological investigations in Igbo land. This was why Shaw was invited by the Nigerian Department of Antiquities in 1958 to conduct a formal archaeological excavation at Igbo Ukwu. Between November 1959 and February 1960, the archaeologist Thurston Shaw carried out excavations in Isaiah Anozie's compound, subsequently named Igbo Isaiah, the area where the original accidental discovery had been made. Shaw also excavated a neighboring compound owned by Richard Anozie called Igbo Richard, where earlier digging of a well had also uncovered metal objects. And not too far from these two, Igbo Jonah would be excavated later. What emerged from these excavations astonished archaeologists. The sheer quantity of copper and bronze artifacts recovered from a single site was unlike anything previously recorded in West Africa. Alongside the metal objects were enormous numbers of beads made from glass and carnelian. Even decades later, no other site in the region has produced such a concentration of materials of this kind. The level of detail and technical skill seen in the cast bronzes found was remarkable. Writing in the 1960s, Shaw pointed out that there was no way to place Igbo Ukwu within the historical framework of that period. Also at the time, very little was known about trade in metals or other goods in the forest regions of West Africa before the arrival of Europeans in the 15th century. Several decades later, Igbo Ukwu remains one of the most important and puzzling archaeological sites in West Africa. The site produced about 75 kilograms of copper and bronze artifacts and over 165,000 beads. There have been long debates about where the materials came from, how the objects were made, and how old they truly are. New excavations, improved radiocarbon dating, textile studies, chemical analysis, and lead isotope testing of metals continue to help refine our understanding of this extraordinary discovery. Archaeological work at Igbo Ukwu focused on three main excavation sites. These sites are known today as Igbo Isaiah, Igbo Richard, and Igbo Jonah. Each location revealed different types of materials, and together they helped us understand how the ancient Igbo Ukwu society used separate space for ritual, burial, and storage. Excavation at Igbo Isaiah uncovered a large concentration of artifacts buried between 40 and 70 centimeters below the surface. The objects were found in their original positions and had remained largely undisturbed because they had been protected for many years by a compound wall that stood above them. The materials found at Igbo Isaiah included bronze, copper, ceramics, and glass objects. These items closely matched the artifacts first discovered in 1938 at the same depth. Because of this similarity, archaeologists concluded that the artifacts were originally part of a single deposit. Thurston Shaw suggested that this space functioned as a storehouse or a shrine used for keeping ritual and ceremonial objects and regalia. The quantity of material recovered from Igbo Isaiah was remarkable. More than 64 kilograms of cast bronze and smith copper were found, along with over 63,000 glass and carnelian beads. The scale of the deposit suggested organized collection and careful placement rather than casual disposal. The second excavation site, Igbo Richard, was located about 30 meters southwest of Igbo Isaiah. This area revealed a different type of activity. Archaeologists uncovered several cisterns and pits, along with a large concentration of broken pottery. These features suggested repeated use of the space over time. In the southeast corner of Igbo Richard, at depths between about 1.75 meters and 2.5 meters, Shaw recovered human bones from several individuals. These remains were adorned with beads and bronze bracelets. 60 centimeters below this level, they found a royal burial chamber with the remains of a single individual. This individual appeared to have been buried in a seated position on a wooden stool with his back supported by the wall of the chamber and his arms propped up by copper brackets on his sides. He had been buried in ceremonial regalia with strings of colored carnelian beads and a bead-studded headdress, on top of which was placed a copper crescent-shaped crown with rotating sun disk positioned on both sides of the head. He also had on a copper breastplate, copper anklets, beaded wristlets, and held a fly whisk on one hand. On the floor, by his feet, were elephant tusks, a large calabash with a copper handle, and stuck into the ground was a copper rod holding up a bronze leopard head. From decoding the symbolism of the objects in the chamber, scholars concluded that the occupant must be a revered priest king, an Eze Nri. While interpretations vary, several have suggested that this might be the burial chamber of Eze Nri Ifikwanim, who was the first king of the Nri kingdom. Ifikwanim founded Nri and created Igbo Ukwu as the capital city. But with testing results dating the tomb to circa 9th century AD, some researchers say it cannot be Ifikwanim who reigned in the 11th century, but that it's more likely to be Eri, the progenitor of the Igbo people. The third excavation site, known as Igbo Jonah, was excavated in 1964. It was the largest of the three sites. Despite its size, it produced the smallest quantity of artifacts associated with the Igbo Ukwu tradition. Most of the artifacts at Igbo Jonah came from an ancient pit on which a more recent pit had been dug. Within the older pit, archaeologists found a striking example of Igbo Ukwu ritual pottery. The pottery featured deeply sculpted surfaces decorated with concentric circles and animal forms, which are characteristic of the Igbo Ukwu's artistic style. Alongside the pottery were pieces of charcoal, animal bones, and a small number of bronze objects consistent with those found at Igbo Isaiah and Igbo Richard. The way these materials were deposited made interpretation difficult. However, archaeologists believe the pit may have been intentionally dug for the purpose of placing ritual materials. Taken together, the three excavation sites revealed that Igbo Ukwu was not a single-purpose location. Instead, it appears to have been a complex center where ritual storage, ceremonial burial, and symbolic deposition all took place. The artifacts discovered at Igbo Ukwu immediately stood apart from anything previously known in West African archaeology. They were not crude or experimental objects. Instead, they showed a level of skill, control, and artistic confidence that suggested a long tradition of metalworking already in place by the time they were made. The most striking objects were made of copper and bronze. These included vessels, ritual containers, pendants, crowns, staffs, and other ceremonial items. Many of them were heavily decorated with fine details that covered nearly every surface. Patterns were dense and complex, yet carefully balanced. Nothing appeared random or unfinished. The metal workers of Igbo Ukwu used advanced casting techniques. The objects were made using the lost wax method, a process that requires great precision. This technique requires molten metal to be poured into a mold created from wax, capturing even the smallest details. At Igbo Ukwu, this method was taken to an exceptional level. Thin lines, tiny dots, spirals, and interwoven designs were cast directly into the metal rather than carved afterward. Some vessels were decorated with images of ropes, chains, insects, and woven textiles. Archaeologists noted that the level of control required to produce such work was unimaginable, especially considering the period in which the objects were made. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Igbo Ukwu artifacts is their consistency in style. Despite the large number of objects recovered, they appear to belong to the same cultural and artistic tradition. This suggests organized production rather than isolated experimentation. The objects were likely made by highly trained specialists working within a structured system. Archaeologists were particularly struck by the absence of similar metal traditions nearby. Unlike Benin or Efe, where bronze casting traditions continued into later centuries, no clear continuation of the Igbo Ukwu style has been found. This made the site even more puzzling. It appeared as a peak of artistic achievement that emerged early and then disappeared without a clear successor. Alongside the metal artifacts were vast numbers of beads. These beads were made of glass and carnelian and came in many colors, shapes, and sizes. Some were strung together while others were found loose, suggesting they were part of garments, regalia, or ritual displays. The presence of such a large quantity of beads raised important questions. Glass and carnelian are not naturally found in Igbo land. This suggested that Igbo Ukwu was connected to long-distance trade networks that extended far beyond the local region. Even though Europeans had not yet arrived on the West African coast at the time, the people of Igbo Ukwu clearly had access to imported materials. Also, the metal used at Igbo Ukwu required access to copper and in some cases tin or lead to create bronze. There is no evidence of local copper mining in the area at the time. This means the raw materials had to be brought in from outside regions. Later scientific studies, including chemical and lead isotope analysis, showed that the copper and bronze likely came from multiple sources rather than a single supply area. This suggests that Igbo Ukwu was linked to more than one trade route. Recent analysis of ores from mines in the Abakaliki area east of Igbo Ukwu proved to be a close match for those used for some of the Igbo Ukwu artifacts. The beads found at the site provide even clearer evidence of long-distance exchange. Thousands of beads were recovered, many made of glass and carnelian. Glass production did not exist locally in Igbo land during this period. Chemical analysis of the glass beads has shown that some were likely produced in regions as far away as North Africa, the Middle East, or South Asia before making their way into West Africa through complex trade chains. Carnelian beads also point to long-distance connections. Carnelian is a semi-precious stone that had been widely traded across Africa and beyond for centuries. The sheer quantity and variety of carnelian beads at Igbo Ukwu indicates sustained access to international trade goods rather than occasional contact. What is important is that these materials arrived centuries before Europeans reached the West African coast. This shows that Igbo Ukwu was part of pre-existing African and transcontinental trade systems. Goods likely moved in stages, passing through many hands and communities before reaching Igbo land. Igbo Ukwu may not have been a coastal trading center, but it was clearly integrated into inland exchange networks. The way these imported materials were used also matters. The people of Igbo Ukwu did not simply consume foreign goods as they arrived. They transformed them into objects that reflected local beliefs, symbols, and authority. Imported copper was cast into vessels and regalia with distinctly Igbo designs. Beads were assembled into elaborate forms of dress and ritual decoration that held local meaning. This combination of foreign materials and local craftsmanship shows that Igbo Ukwu was not dependent on outside cultures for ideas or techniques. Instead, external trade supplied raw materials, while production, design, and symbolic use remained firmly rooted in Igbo society. The scale of material accumulation at Igbo Ukwu suggests that the site was more than a small settlement. It likely functioned as a major ritual and political center. By revealing these connections, Igbo Ukwu changed how historians understand trade in ancient Africa. It showed that complex, far-reaching trade systems existed deep within the forest zone long before colonial contact. And these networks helped sustain one of the most sophisticated artistic traditions ever discovered in Igbo land. After the discoveries at Igbo Ukwu, one of the most important questions archaeologists faced was when the site was used. The richness of the artifacts suggested a highly developed society, but without reliable dates, it was difficult to place Igbo Ukwu within the broader history of West Africa. When Forster Shaw carried out his excavations between 1959 and 1960, radiocarbon dating was still a developing method. Shaw collected charcoal and organic materials from the excavation sites so that scientific dates could be obtained. These samples came from secure archaeological contexts, meaning they were closely associated with the artifacts found at the site. The first radiocarbon results were surprising. The dates suggested that Igbo Ukwu was active around the 9th century AD, several centuries earlier than scholars had expected. At the time, many historians believed that complex metalworking and long-distance trade in West Africa developed much later. The early dates from Igbo Ukwu challenged these assumptions directly. Some researchers initially questioned the results. The level of artistic and technical sophistication seen in the bronzes seemed too advanced for such an early period. As a result, there were debates about whether the charcoal samples truly reflected the age of the artifacts or whether older materials had somehow been mixed into later deposits. Despite these doubts, further testing supported the original findings. Additional radiocarbon dates taken from different excavation areas continue to point to the early medieval period. Over time, confidence grew that the 9th century dates were broadly correct and that the Igbo Ukwu materials did not belong to a later historical phase. As scientific methods improved, researchers returned to Igbo Ukwu artifacts with new tools and questions. More recent studies included refined radiocarbon dating, which provided tighter date ranges. These newer results confirmed that the site was in use from at least the 9th to the 11th centuries. The early dating of Igbo Ukwu had major implications. It showed that advanced bronze casting, complex ritual systems, and long-distance exchange networks existed in the forest zone of West Africa much earlier than previously believed. Debates also emerged about how such a sophisticated tradition developed. Some early interpretations suggested external influence, but no clear evidence supported this idea. Instead, the consistency of the artifact and their strong cultural coherence pointed to local development rooted in Igbo society. The chronology of Igbo Ukwu also raised questions about continuity. While the site showed an early peak of artistic achievement, later archaeological evidence for similar bronze traditions in the immediate area is limited. This made Igbo Ukwu appear both advanced and isolated in time, adding to its mystery. Today, with sites like Leja and others in northern Igbo land producing radiocarbon dates ranging from 2000 BC to 750 BC for early iron smelting, most scholars no longer doubt Igbo Ukwu age. By firmly placing Igbo Ukwu in an early historical context, radiocarbon dating transformed the site from a local curiosity into a landmark discovery. It confirmed that Igbo land was home to one of the most remarkable and early centers of technological and artistic innovation in West Africa. Lastly, the publication on Igbo Ukwu by Thurston Shaw in 1970 came at a critical moment in Nigerian history. It appeared at the end of the Nigerian Civil War, a time when Igbo society was searching for cultural recovery and historical grounding. The discoveries at Igbo Ukwu took on a deeper meaning beyond archaeology. They became a powerful reminder of Igbo creativity and achievement long before colonial rule. Igbo Ukwu gave new energy to an Igbo-centered understanding of history. It challenged older colonial narratives that had minimized or overlooked the depth of Igbo civilization. During the 1970s, scholars began to re-examine Igbo history, culture, and social organization with renewed seriousness. Archaeological, ethnographic, and historical research expanded across the lower Niger region. This period released long-suppressed intellectual energy and reshaped how Nigerian history and prehistory were understood. In archaeological terms, Igbo Ukwu remains unusual. Very few artifacts in the Nigerian forest zone have produced clear radiocarbon dates from the first millennium AD. Sites such as Benin City and Ile-Ife have attracted extensive research and have produced many second millennium AD dates, which shaped long-standing historical narratives. Within Igbo land itself, archaeological evidence shows a complex picture. In northern Igbo land, excavations at iron smelting sites have produced early dates from 2000 BC, with later smelting activity beginning around the 8th century AD and continuing afterward. In other parts of Igbo land, only a small number of sites have been radiocarbon dated. Against this background, Igbo Ukwu stands out. Its 9th century dates, rich material culture, and lack of close parallels make it both exceptional and difficult to explain. It represents a peak of artistic and ritual expression that appears early and does not fit neatly into broader regional patterns. This uniqueness continues to raise important questions about how many similar sites may still lie undiscovered. There has long been an assumption that more bronzes and elaborate artifacts like those found beneath the Anozie family compounds remain buried nearby and across the wider Igbo Ukwu area. More broadly, there are so many mysteries buried beneath Igbo land itself, and so far, we have only just scratched the surface. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you never miss another video by subscribing and clicking the bell icon.